We start.
We start.
Okay. Hello, partners and friends. As valuable members of the HR Professionals Lebanon community, we would like to welcome you today to our very first session of HR Pros Drive, featuring a very special world-renowned international author, trainer, executive coach, and speaker, Micheal Kouly. Throughout his enlightening journey of transformation and leadership, Mr. Kouly has conducted workshops related but not limited to leadership, authority, strategy, policy making to thousands of top business, government, education, NGO execs across the globe. He is currently the chairman and president of the Cambridge Institute for Global Leadership. He is also the go-to advisor for many senior state officials. Mr. Kouly is a World Bank Fellow, a senior international executive who lived in 22 different countries and led a diverse crowd of more than 47 nationalities during his tenure at Reuters, where he served as a managing director for the Middle East and an executive board member of Reuters Continental Europe, Middle East, and Africa. He was also a journalist who wrote hundreds of articles on various international subjects that were translated to several different languages and published on elite major newspapers in the world. Kouly authored 12 books, including 2 Amazon bestsellers, Founding Your Hummus, Forget Happiness, and his latest book, This is Leadership. This is a quick intro in a nutshell about our guest speaker for today, Mr. Micheal Kouly. For more information about his educational workshops, leadership community involvement, success stories, his foundation, publications and events, please do visit his website on www.koulyinstitute.com. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this special and first episode of our HR Pros Drive experience. Mr. Kouly, the floor is all yours.
Hello, everybody. Hi.
Hello.
Is everybody on mute? So that, because I'm hearing different sounds. So if we can be on mute, that would be wonderful. Okay. So I am very delighted to be with you today. I think our evening is going to be a remarkable evening because of your presence and because of the subject. It's a critical subject, and I would recommend and encourage you to pay very good attention, because this is a subject that I have been emphasizing on in the leadership simulations that I have been conducting for the past 15, maybe plus years all over the world. These simulations are 4-day long. They are very intense. They're like 2 weeks in 4 days. And some people regard them as the most intense, one of the most, at least if not the most intense leadership, executive leadership educational programs in the world. It's like 16, 17 hours a day of transformational stuff. So we cover this subject, the subject of identity, self, and role extensively in the simulation. And most often, the comments that I get afterward, sometimes I meet people who have attended our leadership simulation for years after. Sometimes they tell me, and I quote, "This particular subject has saved my life." Of course, I don't talk about this in a physical way, but professionally, emotionally, in terms of exercising leadership, in terms of making it through the journey of life, this subject has been an unforgettable part of the simulation. Now we're going to talk about it in a concise matter, but in the main event we go in details because it's a deep subject. You will see why soon. As we go through this, I want you to know that we're functioning through exceptionally challenging technological conditions. A week ago, or maybe a little more than a week ago, I was having a similar event with a prestigious university, and the following happened. Pay attention to this. The following happened. We lost electricity and power 15 minutes before the session started. Then we lost internet. Then we lost 4G. Then we lost Bluetooth. Then the battery died. Then the AC in the room died. Then the smartphone that was used as backup died. Then the headset and the speaker died. And just you name it, one thing after the other, they just kept on collapsing. Now, the interesting part that the subject of that talk was about entrepreneurship and the importance of resilience in entrepreneurship. So it was a wonderful live case study on how resilient one should be, because we managed to conduct a remarkable 1.5-hour event that you can watch on my YouTube channel. It's called Facing Diversity, I think, not diversity, adversary. I think so. Yeah, it's about entrepreneurship. You can go to the Micheal Kouly YouTube channel and watch it there. It's an experience by itself, because you fix one thing and something else happens. So if this happened, it's likely to happen. It's force majeure. That's how life is. But leadership is about resilience. So stay with us until we fix alternative scenarios and make it a successful conversation. Now, let's start. Identity, self, and role. This subject absolutely fascinates me. And it has helped me throughout my entire career, especially when I'm exercising leadership. And it has helped me also through my life in general. And I'm sure it will help you. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go through each one of them: identity, then role, then self, talk about how each of them is important and how relate to each other, and how then relate to leadership, and how they relate to the purpose, our ultimate purpose of survival and growth. Then I'm going to open up for a few questions that can come from the crowd, so that we can make the best out of this conversation. I'm going to start by talking about identity. Identity is a super essential issue, super essential. And how do you know that? I'm sure you've heard the subject, the title, or the phrase, people have identity issues. When people say that, it means those who they're talking about, they don't know where they're placed. They don't know who they really are. Because what's the definition of identity? What's identity? Identity is who you are, how you define yourself. It is how you think about you, and it's about how the world views you. So these three elements: who are you and who you are, the way you think about yourself, and how the world sees you, how the world views you. Now, why is this important? Having clear identity helps you create barriers. Having clear and boundaries around you, not barriers, sorry, helps you create boundaries around you. And when you create boundaries, then your setup in life, your position in life is defined. And that has many benefits, many privileges, because it identifies you in many ways. Having clear identity also helps you satisfy your feeling of belongingness. So that important instinct, or that important drive or hunger or need that we have, which is the need to belong, that is satisfied or is covered by having a clear identity. It also helps you by having a reference when you want to make to take decisions in life, because you make decisions as per your identity. Now, when I talk about identity, I'm talking about how you define yourself. So I'm going to ask you a question so that we can go into the practical realm of this. If I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, who are you? I'll give you takes just a few seconds to think about this question. Who are you? How do you define yourself in life? If you want to complete the statement, I am so and so, how do you write it? What do you say? Take a few seconds to think about it, because it's your own way of defining yourself. Now, the answer to that, I want you to remember that answer. That answer is the way you have been defining yourself. That's what you have answered now, is you have identified your identity. You have designed, or you have formulated the identity. Now, I will come back to this subject later on, and you will see how it's all connected. And I want you to remember the way you answered this question. Now, so the problem or the tricky issue with the issue of identity is that it is defined by others, and it also can be defined by yourself. How is it defined by others? Let's say you are a male in a group of female people, in a club of female people. They define you as the male. So if they want to talk about you, they say, they give a word, Sam or whatever, or some unisex name, and the way they define who you are when they want to talk about you, they say the man. So the group uses identity to define you. So it's controlled by whom? By others. It is also determined by the context. So let's say you are a Frenchman in Germany. So how do they refer to you? In the context of Germany, you are the Frenchman. In the context of women, right, you are the man. In the context of men, you are the woman. In the context of let's say United States, if you're among Americans, you're the Chinese. So it depends on the context. And we have multiple identities in that aspect. So when you travel, let's say you're in an airplane, you are a passenger. When you land in your country, you are a citizen. Your identity is a citizen. When you are in university, your identity is a student. That's where the word ID card comes from. ID, in fact, means identity. So you're a citizen. Your ID card at school is your identity as a student. Your ID card in the country is your identity as a citizen. Your ID card in a club is your identity as a club member. So this is how it's determined by others, how they view you, and this is how it's determined by context. Now the issue is that it changes. So as the context changes, your identity as perceived by others change. And as those people change, so if they're now in the room, if they're not men, they're women, your identity will change. You become one of them if you are a woman. And let's say if they change to become children, then you are the grown-up there. So it changes, it's a dynamic thing, as others who identify you change, and as the context of their identification also changes. Now, this is a very important aspect. Why? Because we use identity as our anchor. It's much deeper than this, but I'll tell you more about this in a second. We use our identity as what? As an anchor. So when you're defined as per an identity, your anchor is also changing. I'll give an example. Let's say you are in a foreign country and you come from a different country that has a certain kind of image. Let's say you're in the States, or you're in Europe and you come from Africa, or come from the Middle East, you're an Arab. So the moment they say it is this Arab guy or the African guy or the black guy or the gay guy or the old guy, or the military guy, what happens is that you also carry with that name, with that identity, all the emotional load and the framing and the prejudices that come with that term. So when they look at you they give you an identity that has a negative load, and because identity is so important to you, there will be consequences for this. Because if the negative load is heavy, then you will suffer from this. The same way, if the load is positive, you will also enjoy it. So the reason I'm saying that is that the issue of identity is a very serious subject, because the way we identify ourselves, it anchors us. It gives us stability. It defines us. And the way we're defined influences the way we think, the way we react, the way we behave, the way we interact, the way we feel. And it designs, in many cases, our destiny in that moment. Now, there is also the issue of identity that you give to yourself. And that's even more important than the identity that's given to you. How is that important? Because the way you define it yourself, especially at a deep level, almost determines your life. So if you define yourself, let's say, as a minority in a group, then what are you doing? You have automatically put yourself in the mindset of a minority. And based on that, what will happen? Your actions, your behavior, your interaction will be determined. You will act as a minority. And you will use that as a limitation of the scope of your behavior, of your movement. Let's say you are a woman and you are in a corporate environment and you define yourself, I'm the woman here. And that notion of a woman, you look at it as a source of weakness or as a source of disadvantaged identity, then what you have done, you have already determined the scope of your limitations by saying, I'm a woman, I will never go to the executive level. Or, I have this sexual orientation, or I belong to this kind of class, or I am, I'm an old person. This is a young environment, right? So I'm already having limitations of my age. So the issue of you defining yourself, the way you define yourself, is super important in the way you shape your own destiny and in the way you allow yourself to exercise leadership. Because when you exercise leadership, all these identity issues, who you think you are, play into the element. Once I spent a good part of my life, studying and teaching at Harvard University, at the Kennedy School of Government, and at the Harvard Business School. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine. Actually, he was a professor, but he came. I'll tell you what the context is. I said to him, "You are a global thinker. You are a global thinker. So why don't you go to the entire world?" He said, "Oh, Michael, but I'm a minority. I think in ghetto terms." So what he was telling me, this Harvard professor, my friend and colleague at the time, what he was telling me is that I have limitations, or I have set limitations on how far or how wide or the scope of my interaction, because he has defined himself as a minority. That's why the implications of the way you define yourself as a minority is super important, because within that definition, you're already determining the boundaries of your destiny. And when you exercise leadership, that's super important, because let's assume you think of yourself as a minority, whether in terms of gender or age or education or class or color or religion, you name it, right? Let's say you define yourself in that way, and you want to talk about, or you want to consider the aspect of exercising leadership. Imagine the impact of that definition that you have on what? On your prospect of exercising leadership, because you have already framed yourself within the limitation of the identity that you have taken for yourself. That's why the way we identify ourselves is super important. If you get out of all this introduction about the subject of identity, that identity is super important, that it is how others view you, with all the limitations and the consequences and the pluses and minuses that come with that. More importantly, with the way you define yourself, with all the limitations, the consequences that come with that, right? And you understand that it's all contextual. It all depends on others. It all depends on your mood. It all depends on your baggage, on your wood, on your upbringing, the way you look at yourself. And this is always changing, especially when it comes from others and it's contextual. Then you can understand why the issue of identity is super, super, super important. So let's put that on the side. So we've just covered now the headlines in general of what identity is and how important it is for us. This was actually the introduction, because I want to go now to the issue of self and role. Now, self and role that integrate into the concept of identity, and I will tell you how. Self and role are super, super, super important concepts. Why they're so important? Because they go at the core of identity, because most of the time, in fact, much of the time, if not all the time, unless you are very conscious at an intellectual and spiritual level, philosophical level, most of the time people identify themselves as their role. And when they mix that self and role, when they mix that, right, when identify themselves as per role, instead of identifying themselves as per their self, and I will tell you later what self means, then that's a dynamite, that's an explosive interaction, that's an explosive position. Because if you identify yourself with what you're not, with something that's not really solid, then you've just destabilized your life, or you've put yourself in a high risk and exposure situation. I will explain to you more in detail. What is a role? Everything that you do in life is a role. Listen very carefully. Everything that you do in life is a role, and we play multiple roles. And Shakespeare, the great poet, has this famous phrase: life is a play, the world is a theater, is a stage, and we all are players on this stage. And we change our roles from time to time. One day you play the, take it in your case, one day you play the junior executive or employee, another day you play middle management, then you play the CEO, then the board member, then you play unemployed, then you play a husband. But all of these roles are changing, and we play multiple roles. So being a father is a role, being a husband is a role, being a son, a sibling, a sister, and a brother is a role. I am guessing that part of the words, or part of you, when I ask you, who are you, how do you define yourself, when I ask you to fill in the blanks, I'm sure some of you define themselves as per the role they play in their family, or the role they play in society, or the role they play professionally. So some of you, and in the simulations, I always ask this question, and I get a variety, of answers. And I've done this over, the past 15, 20 years, and I've asked this question to tens and tens of thousands of people, ranging from, junior executives up to board members, and sometimes even heads of state. I even once asked a president of a country, how do you define yourself? Who are you? And it took him like, 30 seconds to understand it. And after 30 seconds, he couldn't find the answer, because it was a tricky question. I mean, for him, it was a difficult question, so he avoided the question. Of course, we talked about it later on. I was an advisor to that president, so I'll tell you more about it later on. But it's a heavy question. So I've seen all kinds of answers, from so-and-so to father, to president, to CEO, to CFO, to HR director, to HR vice president, to HR, whatever, chief human officer, you name it, head of training, whatever. I'm a consultant. I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a neighbor. I'm an American. I'm a Emirati. I'm a Saudi. I'm a Qatari. I'm a French. I'm German. I'm Lebanese. Whatever it is, all of these are roles, and some of them are social constructs. So society has constructed them, right? Some of them are roles, and some of them are social contract constructed by society. They're like masks. I want you to imagine, you in a room full of masks, and each mask displays a character. So what you do, if you remember Chinese or Japanese opera, you see them how they change the mask, right? They must smiley or sad or crying or angry. So all of these roles are changing all the time. So we have multiple roles. Now, what's the problem with this? The problem with this issue is that most of us make our roles our identity. I used to do that. In my professional career, I worked for around 17 or 16 years with Reuters in 22 countries. And my job moved from being a war correspondent to the president and the CEO for Reuters in the Middle East. And I covered more than 22 countries, through this assignment and in previous also assignments. So I used to define myself, I remember this very well. I used to define myself as, hi, I'm Micheal from Reuters. I used to do that without understanding what I was doing. I was so taken by the role, because I'm so passionate about leadership and exercising leadership. I was so taken by the role that I've made it my identity. Now, what's the danger of that? The danger of that is the following. Number one, I'm not Micheal of Reuters. I'm Micheal Kouly. That's number one. Number two, all roles are temporary. All roles, you name it. Give me a role and I challenge you. You'll see it's temporary. You're with me? Okay, somebody has to mute. Right. So all roles are temporary. In what sense? Today you are an HR director. Give it a few more years. Either you'll be promoted or your job will end. The company might close. They might ask you to leave. You might get into retirement, and one day you will not be an HR director. Your role is a CEO. One day you will not be a CEO because either you will ask to leave, or you will resign, or something will happen that will make you leave, or the company will close, or the market conditions will change. Somebody else will buy the company, or you get your retirement age and you leave. So you name it. Now, today you are a father. One day your kids will leave. Now, officially, of course, you'll be father. But if your son is, like 6,000 miles away, in title you are a father. But do you wake up every day exercising your fatherhood? No. Your role as a father will diminish at that time. Your role as a husband. Okay, today you're a husband, but one day, God forbid, let's say you might divorce. And once you divorce, you're not a husband anymore, or your spouse might go away or might die. Then you become a widow, and the same thing for a wife. Your husband might one day is no more there, so you become a widow. You're a sibling. You might lose your brother and sister, or you might have some relational problems, and some people end up don't talking to their siblings for years. So you're not actually playing that role anymore. So you name it. You're a son now. You lose your mom and dad, and you're not a son anymore. So you name it, and I will show you how that ends. Take the president. Obama is a role, right? He used to be a president for 8 years. Now no more. Queen Elizabeth, she's playing a role when she's, executing her royal duties. At home, she plays the role of a wife with her husband. With her kids, she plays the role of a mother. So that's the issue with roles. Eventually, they will They will disappear. They will end because all roles end. And now, if you make your role your identity, and then your identity disappears, what will happen to you? The entire foundation where you're standing on disappeared. Now, one day came after I finished my assignment with Reuters, after 16 or 18 years, I was 37 or 36 as the CEO of that place, and I saved my time for 3 years. And then my time changed, and the opportunity in front of me, ahead of me, was to go to some other faraway places. And I've decided that time that I don't want to go there because I had enough of an international life, and I wanted to settle down and start a family. So one day happened that I woke up and I was not the CEO of Reuters anymore. Now, if I had identified myself as the CEO of Reuters, that made that my identity, and then that role, for some reason, in my hand or because of other elements, right, disappeared. So what happened to me? And I know cases, and I'm sure you know cases, where people after retirement, they became sick, they became depressed. And there are also statistics that people after retirement, especially those who had identified themselves with their role, what happened? They end up dying prematurely. Why? Because that role was giving them meaning. And when that meaning disappeared, there was no, at a deep, deep subconscious level, reason for their existence. I know I've heard the stories where couples, a spouse dies, then after a year or two, the other partner disappears. I know stories where somebody, they lose their job, and because they have identified themselves so much with that job, so what happens? Their entire life collapses and they lose their marriage. I know people who ended up being homeless because they lost the role that they were playing. I know people who have been for the past 20 years without a job because at a certain time, when they were at the peak of that job, they were asked by the company to leave. And because that role was made at an emotional, deep level, their identity, they made it by that. They personally made that. When that role was gone, there was nothing left. And they're still stuck there. There is a vacuum there. And I know them, and I know the consequences of that, on their family, the relationship with their kids, with their spouses, and with their health. And they became sick and they start adding weight. And some of them till today, right? They haven't found jobs, not because they're not competent, but they can't see themselves in other jobs. Why? Because they had framed themselves in the role that they used to give them identity. Now, why did they do that? Because that role satisfies some emotional and psychological hungers and needs within them. It gave them pride. It gave them, sense of belonging. It gave them prestige. It gave them power. It gave them whatever they were hungry for. So that disappeared. Vacuum was created, and their entire life was shattered. That's why, as I said to you, identity is super important. And that's why when you make your roles super important and make it as your core identity, you're really standing on quicksand. And sooner or later, something will happen, because that's the nature of life. Everything comes to an end. And when that hits you, because you're standing on a very thin layer, right? Then the consequences will be very, very serious to you. Now, the other thing is that identities are volatile. So not just temporary, they're volatile. Today you're doing that job, tomorrow you're doing another job. Today you're in this country, tomorrow is in that country, right? And you name it. They're completely volatile. Why is volatile? Because they're also controlled by others. Whoever gave you that role can take that role away, or can reshape that role, or can redefine it. So they're temporary, and they're volatile, and they're always come to an end. All these elements create a feeling of uncertainty, create a feeling of ambiguity, and they indirectly create anxiety. And it's a very dangerous strategy people usually unknowingly or without having enough consciousness use. Why? Because it feeds them, and they make it their identity, right? So that they find their place in life. But sooner or later, as you can see from life, look around you, look at what happened last year, the year before, whatever, God knows what will happen in the coming years. Life is unpredictable. Nothing is certain. You put your entire stability at emotional, spiritual, psychological level, emotional and mental stability on a shaky ground. Sooner or later, no questions asked, something will happen that will shake you from inside. Now, the other element is that it is controlled by others, so people can use it to manipulate you. I'll tell you a story. This is, of course, all my stories are real examples. I don't want to name names, mention names because of identity, because of confidentiality issues. I know somebody who was a managing director of a company in a hardship country. I'll say it, Saudi Arabia. He hired people. I know a specific person. He hired the person to play a certain role. That role was a sales role. Okay, stay with me. Now, the assignment was that this person will go to this country, Saudi Arabia, and play that role for 2 years. At the end of these 2 years, guess what happened? This manager or this boss, the president of that company, he offered to change the title of that person. So instead of calling him sales, he called him senior sales, on condition that he stays for another 2 years. Now, the word senior has an ego advantage, at least from the surface. It means that you are, from the ego position or the hierarchy, you're doing a more important job. At the core, it was the same job, but senior. So that guy accepted. Why? Because that word seniority, right, being a senior person, senior salesperson, fed his ego, fed his need to be identified and to belong to a higher group. Psychologically, it fed him. And because he was making that identity, he accepted. 2 years finished. Then he said, you know what? I will make you now business executive. Now, guess what? The title business executive does not exist. And this person created this title because he understood what the psychology of that employee, just to make him stay in that hardship country. Of course, now I hear that Saudi Arabia is not a hardship country anymore in many ways, right? Because life has developed there from a social and professional point of view. So at that time, it was a very hardship country. He accepted. And he came to that manager and said, what's this title? Is this title important? He said, of course important. Business executive. And you're the only person who will have that. Is it more important than senior sales executive? He said, of course, more important. So he accepted to stay 2 more years, now 6 years. True story, stay with me. And then he said, after the 2 years, he said, you know what? Why don't we consider, I move you to another city and you become senior business executive. I'm not joking. Same thing happened. Now we're 8 years. And then he said to him, if you stay 2 more years, I'll make you sales manager. 10 years was taken from that person's life because of what? A change of few words on a business card. At the core of the job itself, that person kept doing exactly the same thing. What were these things? Taking care of, I don't know, some portfolio of accounts that he had to, pay attention to and sell to and keep, and what salespeople do. So this is the power of identity, and this is the power of making your role your identity. Be very careful about that. Be very careful about that. I'll tell you why. And I want you to open your eyes and ears very well. Be very careful about that. Listen very carefully. Roles succeed and fail. Roles succeed and fail. You don't succeed and fail. I talk you here, when I say you, I'm talking you as the real you, the deep you. And I'll tell you what that means. Listen carefully. If your career failed, if your job, you were given an assignment, as a certain assignment, given a promotion, and it was doomed, it was decided that you have failed in this assignment, that does not make you, underline big U, as a failure. Technically, you could not do or satisfy the requirement of that job, right, as it was expected. And maybe even the expectations were too harsh and unrealistic, and maybe also that person's judgment was too harsh. So if you accept that the failure of your role is your failure, you will be devastated. The same thing about your relationship. If your relationship fails, that does not make you a failure. If your marriage fails, does not make you, at the core you, as a human being, a failure. If your country fails, right, does not make you as a citizen a failure. If you are a parent, as a parent, your kids or whatever people tell you that you failed as a parent, it might be true that technically speaking, you did not perform that role well, but that does not make you a failure. If your siblings are not happy with the role that you're playing as a brother or a sister, that does not make you a failure. If your children judge you as a bad parent, quote unquote, that does not make you a failure. If your spouse says to you that you're not a good husband or partner, that does not make you a failure. If your friends tell you that, okay, I don't know what to do with this one. Okay. Somebody is telling me that the Facebook is, the sound is, the volume is too low on Facebook. Okay, let's go back. So where were we? If your spouse tells you you are that accuses you of being a failure as a spouse, as a husband, as a partner, as a lover, or whatever it is, that does not make you a failure. If your friends are not happy with you, the same thing. Now, I am not saying that you should not pay attention to your role. You should play your role to the fullest. This is your moral, professional, human, ethical duty. You have to do that. You absolutely have to do that. It is your role, it is your responsibility, ethical responsibility, to do that to the fullest. You have to do that. But things happen. And sometimes we do things in a suboptimal way. Now, society will judge us. Other people will judge us. Their judgment might be accurate, or their judgment might not be accurate, right? It doesn't matter. If that happens, you should not internalize it to you, within you, and project all that your entire being has failed. Why is this important? Because I know people who have been completely devastated when one of their roles has failed, technically has failed. And this happens because you can't be perfect in everything. I tell you why it's important. Because, okay, you might be a bad employee or a suboptimal employee, but you might be a great brother, a great son, a great father, a great neighbor, a great friend. You might be, a lousy husband or wife, but you might be a brilliant sister. You might do this job horribly, but you might do another job in a more, in a more beautiful way. So keeping this in mind is so important, because I'll tell you what, in life, there will be things that you will do that they will fail. Not because there's something wrong in you, because you can't be perfect in everything. That's number one. Number two, because also sometimes we're not perfect. Sometimes you do things in a suboptimal way. So these things will happen. I hope they don't happen, but they will happen. If you don't protect yourself from inside, then you're in deep trouble, because you will position yourself as failed. I know people who never recovered from a failed relationship, not even marriage. I know people who never recovered from a relationship that lasted 6 months. I've heard people who get engaged for 3 months, 3 weeks, and then the relationship collapsed, and it's like 7 years now, and they're still depressed. It happens. I know people who have committed suicide. I'm sure you've heard about these people, after they've been fired or after they've been let go. I know people who have committed suicide after they've been bullied, or I heard of at least people, or after they've been divorced, or when the relationship broke up. So point is, we in life, we play multiple roles. Everybody does that. Some of these roles will be successful and some of these roles will be failures. These are just roles. They're very important part of what we do, super important. But you have to distinguish that from your true core self, from your true core self. Otherwise, if you internalize it and to make that failure the failure of the entire being, I'm telling you from now, you will collapse. You will collapse. And I've seen that happening all the time. Clear? So that's point. Now, the same thing applies on success. Exactly the same thing applies on success. Let's say you did something and absolutely brilliant. You were super successful in this. You were euphoric. You're dancing. And it was outstanding success. Now, do you have the right to be said to celebrate? Of course you have the right to celebrate. Dance. Do whatever you have to do. Be happy. Do, you name it, right? But remember, you've succeeded in that role, and you should enjoy your role, that role, that success to the maximum. But if you internalize it so deeply, right, if you take it beyond the success of that role, what happens? Your ego will be exposed. Your ego will be exposed. And once your ego is exposed, it gets into your head, once that technical success that is justified and it should be celebrated, appreciated, and respected, once that happens, what will happen to you? Now you've lost your balance, you've lost the way, you lost your sanity, you lost your common sense. You will look at things through overconfidence, through the illusion of excessive power, that you're invincible and whatever that is. And then life, of course, has its own way of waking you up, slapping you on the face, right? When you fail in other things, that come down, my friend, come down, right? Grow up and come down to the ground. Enough of lying in la la land, right? So keep this in mind. Why should you? We're disconnected from Facebook. So we'll keep this in mind. Why? Because your roles will experience failures, and your roles will experience what? Successes. You need to make sure that you attribute that to the role. Can you put this back on live? Live. It's not live now. 1 second. Okay, so second is short. Stop this one. Okay, my apologies. We're using multiple technologies. So why is this important? Because in whatever role you're ladies and gentlemen, you're playing, some of these roles you'll be successful, and some of these roles you'll fail. Keep it in that perspective, and make sure that you don't make it at the core of identity. Otherwise, you're really living a turbulent life all the time. Now, let's go to the self issue. The self issue. Who are you? Now, this is a long subject. We can go spiritual. We can go spiritual. You can go spiritual, and we can take it to the corest possible level. Who are you? One of the definition of self, one of the great definition of self that I really like is a definition of self by Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists. He talks about the self as the following. Yourself, what's yourself? Yourself is your entire being. That includes your conscious being and your subconscious being. It is what you're made of at a holistic level. Everything about you is yourself. And if you go deep, 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 deep spiritually, what are you? If you talk in spiritual language, your pure soul, your pure spirit. And in many religions, at a spiritual level, you carry the spirit of the divine, the spirit of the creator, the spirit of God, right? That's in many religions, and billions of people believe that. So bottom line is that you, wherever you are, at your core, you are a human being. That's who you are. You are a human being. Why is this important? Why you should keep this important? Because you have to make that your anchor. Truly anchor. What does anchor mean? You have to make that your point of gravity that stabilizes you, so that when your role messes up, right, you remember that you're still anchored. You're still anchored. You're unshakable. I must tell the story of a guru who was in a press conference absolutely bitterly attacked by journalists. Bitterly attacked by journalists. Now, what happened after the entire press conference was over? A friend told me this. She said she looked at the mirror and looked at herself in the mirror, and she said, I looked at my eyes and I saw my soul was completely intact. Completely intact. Nothing touched my soul from outside. I did not leave anything that to go inside. That's why it said don't let compliments go into your head, and don't let criticism go into your heart. What does that mean? Don't let them go to your core, so that they don't stabilize you. Because what these things are saying what is perceived from the outside. Your core should always be intact. You are a human being with all what that entails, with your imperfections, with your brilliance, with your journey of learning, with your failures, with your mess, with your blessings, with the beauty you create, with the mess that you create. That's who you are. And that all is valuable. That's priceless. That's bigger than any role. That's bigger than your power. That's bigger than your prestige. That's bigger than your position. That's bigger than your popularity. That's bigger than having 1 million followers, or having, being the CEO or the president or the king, or having billions of dollars, or being in the media all the time, and being seen as a very powerful person. These things are super important. They are important, but these things are volatile. Today are here and tomorrow they're not here, and because life is unpredictable. So when you make sure that your true self is in your right, you make your true self, your true identity. I'm a human being. I manifest the spirit of the divine, let's say. Whatever, you use your own language to go as deep as you can when you want to describe your core, then you are in a much better position. Then you are in a better position. Now, why is this important? As I said to you, because life is a journey of endurance. It's an endurance race. Life is full of surprises. Life is, as Khalil Gibran said, a tear and a smile. And in my view, it's like, many tears and maybe occasional smiles. That's how life has become. That's how life is. You have to be ready for all these situations, and you have to maintain your balance, your sanity, your equanimity, your clear thinking in all these stages of life, in all the turbulences of life, in all the joys, in all the dips, in all the highs, in all the lows, so that what happens, so that you can continue and live a fulfilling, full, exciting, worthy, exceptional, exuberant journey of life. One last point I want to say, and this is also super important in my view. People deal with you as per your role. I want you to reflect on this. When people love you, they love you because the role that you're playing in their life. You end up playing a different role that is not favored by them. What happens? Their feelings will change. Today you are a good brother, tomorrow you're a bad brother. Today you're a great friend, tomorrow is a bad friend. In my corporate life, I have taken decisions, right? Corporate decisions, business decisions, that for many people, they made me the hero. You know, they put my pictures on their desk and you name it, you name it. Now, was this really about me? No, of course it was about me. It was about the impact of the role that I played in their life. That role, right? That role took a decision that was in their own personal interest, and as a result, they were absolutely adorable. They used to carry my briefcase open, royal treatment, absolute royal treatment. Now, give it a few months, and as a CEO, you take another decision that's not in their interest, then it completely flips. So whatever people, I mean, let's say your partner, you're married, you treat your spouse in the most loving way, as a queen or as a royalty or as a king. What's the reaction to that? Absolute, happiness and joy and give me more and I love you and I adore you, the whole thing. You are the same person. Start abusing and mistreating your partner. What happens to you from now on? What happens to you when you do that? What happens? The entire perception changes, and you have turned from being an adorable person to absolutely disastrous, vicious, villain, malevolent, horrible person. So the way the world look at you is as per the role that you play in their life, and you need to keep that in mind and not let it go into your heart, into your soul from inside, because it reflects what they think. It reflects what they're coming from. It reflects their perception of things. It has nothing to do with you. That's why I'm telling you, don't be fooled by popularity. Don't be fooled by power. And you know that from the power dynamics. You are a normal staff, then okay, people like barely look at you. You become a boss, then the entire dynamics change. You become the CEO, then the whole world changes. And the next day you're not a CEO anymore. They can't even. You'll be lucky if they say hello if they see you in the street. And I've seen that from people. One day, they were president or they were generals, and the most whatever, their phone would not stop ringing. Then the next day, right, they lost their job. Then the phone doesn't ring anymore. Where did that respect go? It was never for the job. And I remember it was never for the person. It was for the role himself. And I remember in an occasion, I think Abdullah of Jordan mentions this when he recalls his experience with his late father, King Hussein. He talks about a lesson, and the lesson is the following. He said his father told him, he mentioned that at a Harvard lunch many, many years ago, after he became king. He said his father told him, son, never believe for a moment that you're the king. Whoever sits on that chair is the king. Don't let it get into your head. And there's a phrase, very important phrase, we know about it, that explains that. The king has died, long live the king. It's one sentence. There's not even a comma between them. The moment the king has died, immediately it was replaced by somebody else. Long live the king. Who talks about Obama now? Nobody. Who talks about George Bush Jr.? Nobody. Who talks about Bill Clinton? Nobody. When they were president, entire cities will be closed when they used to visit some countries. Now they're just normal citizens. They have to, stand in the queue or whatever, just get normal treatment. So the point is, people treat you as per your role and as per the perception of their role and as per the impact of their role in their life. Never, 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 never let it go inside, because it's so volatile. And if you let it go into your head, when that changes, you will be completely destroyed. If you make your self-worth, right, dependent on how people perceive you from the outside, although that is very important, if you take it to that core level, then you're in dangerous position, because one day things will change and people's perception will change, either of you or of the role that you're playing, and you will suffer. Now, all of what I've said is important for your journey as a person, as an individual, as a professional, right, in your career, in all aspects of your life, in your journey of survival and growth. All of this multiply by 100 when it comes to leadership. Because in leadership, you are at the, at the center stage. When you exercise leadership, the spotlight is on you. You get all the attention, and whatever you do is visible by everybody and has ripples around you all the place, everywhere. And some things that you will do when you exercise leadership, will please others, and they will follow you to the death in that context, because what you're doing is perceived to be in their interest. And at the same time, some other people will hate you now, and they will express that. And when you make decisions that are so painful, they will seriously express that. Seriously express that. I had in my career, when I was, I played the role of a CEO and multiple times, I had to take decisions where I had to let go of hundreds and hundreds and sometimes thousands of people. Now, it's a very difficult decision. Now, the staff, people don't know that I had to fight and use all my credentials and my political capital and reputation and relationships with the board for months, so that instead of making it 1,000, I make it like 700. So I save as many jobs as I can. People don't know that, but in the end, when you do it, all of this is irrelevant to them. But when you have to do that, you have it, and your role is to make difficult decisions. That's why leadership is hard. You have to take difficult decisions. When you do that, you can imagine the reaction. You can imagine personal hatred. Sometimes, even in my cases, I received death threats. Now, I'm not talking about the emotional blackmail, emotional pressure. I mean, you become the most hated person, and you're only doing your job. Now, you let go a few hundred people, but you save like 10,000 other people, right? People don't care. It's also, and it's their right to do that. You can 100% understand it. And maybe you do the same in other contexts, but that's how human nature is. Now, if you don't keep the issue of identity, self, and role clear in your mind, if you don't know how to differentiate them, if you don't make your core self your identity and put things in the perspective of your role, then you will be absolutely devastated. Devastated. It's very difficult to face resistance and hatred and and tension all the time. And just just look at. Let's talk. Go to TV in your country. Let's take the United States. The president of the United States. I'm not talking politics. Doesn't matter whether you like him or not. Every single day, people love him, and people absolutely they crucify him every single day. Imagine if he takes all that in, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 1 month, and then you get to the point that from inside you're totally empty, you're destroyed, because it gets to you if you don't know how to make these distinctions and you don't know how to protect yourself. In your country, whatever country you are, sometimes there's praise the leader so much that he thinks himself or herself that they're one step away from God. In other cases, they look at their parents, their children, they look at what's on TV and the way people are just cutting them into pieces. It destroys the entire family. So by keeping these concepts in mind, the difference between and identity, self and role, and making sure that you always put your anchor in yourself, understand how you protect that self, the beautiful self that is absolutely, a miracle of being, a miracle at the universal level, because so far we've never seen, to our knowledge, something as miraculous as what a human being can be about. Of course, now we do horrible things, but we also do amazing things. It's beautiful to be a human being. And it's beautiful to accept what being a human being is all about. So you protect that, you cherish that, and you shield yourself from that, and then you exercise leadership, and then your chances of success are better. Equally important, more importantly, and I'm closing now, your chances of surviving and growing in life are much more. Now, I have to stop now because I spoke more than what I was planning to. Because I love this subject. I absolutely love this subject because I've seen the impact that understanding this has made on people, how it has saved them as they go through the dips and the highs and the lows of their life at the personal, professional, relational, you name it, level. And in the leadership simulation that we do, the one I talked about, because it's a simulation, it's just not a normal course. It's not a classical, it's an experience by itself. It's an unforgettable experience by itself. We go through this to the deepest level. We really go through this deep, and I don't let people leave before this is really understood. And that's why I keep getting these feedbacks that, that statement that you made, this subject that you talked about has really saved us. Saved me after I was fired. I was retired. I've lost my marriage. I lost my health. I lost my friends. So on, so on, so happened. People attacked me. I exercised leadership. I was marginalized. You name it. So it is an amazing thing. So I have to stop here in the interest of time and the interest of my energy. Also, it's 8 o'clock. We've been engaged in creative work in my we call it Think Studio in my office, and we've been doing, we write books here and do research about leadership and strategy and understanding systems, organizations, growth. So we've been engaged in creative work for the past, 14 hours, and you can see I need more energy. So I'll stop here, and I want to move to the questions so that I can answer more specific questions. But I want your compassion also now, because I have to go. I have other engagements. It's already 9 o'clock here, 9:03 it says. So I'll take maybe 2 or 3 questions, because this is an endless subject. We can always talk about this in other occasions. If you had the opportunity to attend the leadership simulation, we will go much, much deeper into this and experience it to the fullest. It's one of the most important aspects of understanding how to exercise leadership and how to make it in life, how to survive and to grow. So thank you very much for your attention. I know it's a heavy subject. I hope, at the end of this long day, I hope I've made it clear enough. And now I open the floor for your question. And I drink my cup of water. Question.
Thank you so much, Michael. This was amazing.
I know. Because it changed my life. I know, I really mean it. It changed my life, because in the spikes up and down of my life, because you can't control life. Things happen to you, as you can see now, Corona, economy, you name it. So this has maintained my sanity. So I know it's amazing.
And definitely it will change the life of many after this session.
I definitely hope so, because it did change the lives of many. It's not easy, but you have to, keep this in mind, because where is it? I'll show you something. This is the book. It's my first book. I wrote it to my kids. It became an Amazon bestseller, and required learning in many schools and many schools and organizations. They asked everybody to read it. I'll just show you something. Where is it? I'll tell you what's the first word is. Okay, let's see if you can read. Can you read what's the first word that says?
Shift happens.
Exactly. So I wrote it shift. Actually, it's a polite way of saying something else. So shift or shoot or something else, it's a bad word, happens in life. So when shift happens in your life, right? You have to be ready and strong from within you, emotionally and intellectually and spiritually strong. Otherwise, it will cut you into pieces, especially when you exercise leadership. Especially when you do that. My God, no mercy. Tell me.
Anyone has any question for Michael?
I think they're all under shock now. or they're revising their life. Remember also, don't believe what they tell you. When they give you this feeling of importance, don't believe that. It's all about the roles. In one of my assignments, I used to get 22 birthdays. When it was my birthday, when I was a CEO at Reuters in the Middle East. So I used to travel, being in charge, you have to go visit all the countries. In the months of my birthday, 22 countries, 22 birthdays, right? Gifts, you name them, right? It's like I'm the most lovable person. Now ask me, how many people remember my birthday the year after I finished my assignment and I moved to somewhere else? 0. Actually, 1. There's somebody from Tunisia He's became my friend now. His name is Najmuddin. So every birthday he calls me. The rest, I'm talking about hundreds, zero, absolutely zero. So whoever sits on that chair, he gets the compliment. It's about the chair. It's not about you. That's why stay humble.
Mr. Kouly, can I have the speak?
Kouly, go ahead. Kouly.
Okay. First, thank you for the session. It was an amazing topic. Now, can you tell us how would you answer the question who you are after this session?
Me, about me as a person?
Yes.
Sure.
Let us learn from your experience how we can answer such a question. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm going to answer. You have to go to my YouTube channel because I made a special. Somebody in an interview asked me this. I tried to escape it, but I couldn't. Anyway, but I'll answer you. Who I am. I'm going to answer it at the different levels. Huh? At the core level, I'm a vessel that contains the spirit of the divine. I contain the spark of life itself. So I am a manifestation of life. Let me take it further. And I'm saying not just as Michael, as a human being. So you also are the same. And I can see your picture is beautiful. So what's your name?
Sorry, it was muted. My name is Heba. So you're saying that we should define ourselves in terms of human. This is what you meant, right?
So not only human. I see myself as a vessel that contains the spark of life, of the divine. And I see myself as a human being as the most amazing creation of life itself. If everything around us that is alive is a form of life, then what could be a more beautiful manifestation of that life than being a human being? Absolutely miraculous. Now, unless we discover somewhere else, God knows, in some other planet, that there are people who are much more sophisticated than us, then that's another story. But still, I mean, look at us as human beings. Look at all this beauty that we've created. Look at the way we created art and science, and we're now going to Mars. And look at the love and the compassion and the poetry and Shakespeare and Rumi and Gibran and Fairuz and you name it. And so you in all fields, all of that is who we are. All of that is you and me, and is every other person. Is you, Hiba, is me, Michael. Now, add to that. And in some of the Holy Scriptures, they say God created people at their own liking, right? And their own liking. And whether you believe or not, that's a different subject. I'm talking about the Scripture. And in other religions, they say when God created people, He blew His own spirit. You know, He breathed, exhaled His own spirit into.
But by this, we are all the same.
Of course, we're all the same at that level.
Then where is our identity? This is the reason behind my question. If I am a human and you are a human, where is my Heba's identity? Where's yours identity? Where I can identify myself, make myself unique. You know, we are unique. No one is similar to the other.
Beautiful. So first layer, when everything challenges you, when the whole world is trying to break you and destroy you, right, in many different forms, not as a conspiracy, but because that's the nature of the world, you know. Nature is against you, age is against you, you become older and you die. Nature is against you, where the weather.
So the experience is shaping our identity.
Wait, Hiba.
Right?
So you remind yourself all the time when you're shaken from all different sides, that inside, that's who you are, and that is extremely valuable. So never ever drop your own appreciation of your own dignity as a human being. You never drop your love of yourself, not egoistic love, your appreciation of yourself as an expression, the most beautiful expression of life as a human being. Now that's one layer. Now add another layer. Let's talk about Hiba or any other listener. Add to this, Hiba, all that you have learned in life, all the talents that you bring, all the experiences that taught you, all the beauty that you can create, all the success that you have created that benefited so many people, or the smiles you put on people, and add to that all the lessons that you have learned, your capacity to learn, and your capacity to put your failures and the lessons from your failure into your successes, into your experiences, and to create an amazing life, and to translate that into beautiful interactions that could add a blessing and add, add dignity and add gifts to other people's life. Now, add to that as well, the potential that you have. So at core, you are the most beautiful form of life. That's number one. That's at the core. That's the inner circle. The outer circle is hiba as you are now, in terms of everything that you've learned, your successes, your learn lessons, your failures, your experiences, and everything that is helping you now create the beauty that you are creating or you've created so far. Now, that's the second one. And that also deserves appreciation. The third one is the potential that you have, is everything that you can be, that times 10, 20, 50 that you can do in terms of adding beauty to the world, adding value to the world, making the world and making other people's life more beautiful, even with a smile, even with a hug, even with help, even with assistance, even by listening to somebody, even by not judging, even by controlling your anger, your temper, anything that you could do to grow as a human being in your amazing potential that is unbelievably expensive and wide compared to what you have done so far, is also part of you. So you are the most beautiful soul of the divine, of life itself, the spark of life. And then you are hiba now, and you are hiba, all the hiba that you can be, with all the beauty that can create. Now, will there be mess, tears, failures, mistakes with that? Of course that will be. That why will that come? Because that's how we learn. Because that's also part of being who we are. And our beauty, we are appreciated by love, by the divine, and by people who love you, not just the divine. People who love you, they love you for everything that you are, all the beauty that hiba creates or anybody else, and all the mistakes and the mess that you create, for the fact that you are a human being. So that's who you are. And you keep this in mind all the time. And the more you the more you challenge hiba, the more you go to your core and remind yourself of the fact that you are a vessel that contains the spark, an amazing spark of life.
Okay, dear. Thank you a lot.
Any other question? And there was silence.
I have a question.
Your name?
My name is Shermeen. I'm an HR professional.
Hi, Shermeen.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for your time tonight. I would like to ask you, how can someone know him herself when we all know that we are labeled today by all the conditioning since we were in our mother's wombs, by society, by our schools, by our friends? How can someone know his true himself without the label of the society and the roles that we are given, etc., etc.? Thank you.
Okay. There's the short answer and the slightly longer answer. The short answer is you have to come and attend the simulation. And I'm not doing this as a commercial exercise, not at all, because everybody in my family and whoever I know have attended it many times, because we go deep into answering them. Because this is not, you have to experience the answer to that. You have to see it yourself. You have to see it yourself. That's why it's experiential, and we call it simulation. And that's why it's so tough. That's why we cry, and you cry when you discover who you are and how beautiful you are. But to give you the longer question, as I said to you, between brackets, listen to this again. We're going to post this, and I'm sure it will be on. I will put it on my YouTube channel, and it's going to be on Facebook as well. So listen to this again, because the answer was there, but let me just paraphrase some of the, summarize what I've said. This is a fact of life, that we will be judged and appraised, and they do performance appraisal, right, which is a form of judgment. Well, let me tell you something. Everybody is doing performance appraisal to you all the time. You're doing it at home, in society, family, mom, dad, husband, partner, boyfriend, children, the whole thing. If you have kids, sometimes your kids will tell you you're not a good mom or dad just because you didn't buy them, 6 ice creams because, it will hurt them. So you're always in performance appraisal. So that will always happen. And some people will be happy with you, some people will not be happy with you. And your mom and dad will raise you with the best intentions, but they will also pass on to you all their insecurities and scars. Your mom and dad can raise you with the mindset, give you the identity that you're a minority, or that you're a woman, that you cannot do this, and that you're, a Lebanese, or you're Arab, or you're black, or you're white, or you're, gay, or whatever that is, right? And with all limitations that come with that. So that will happen. That happens. It's normal, right? Now, with the best intentions, when they do that, they're also limiting you. And some other parents raise their kids, they tell them you can do anything in life, and don't care about people's opinion. Just discover your purpose, and then have a plan in your life and go for it and grow, and you can do better, and you will do amazing things, and you will be a blessing to the world, and so many other things. So it depends on the context of your upbringing. That you cannot control, because you can't control your society, you can't control your parents, right? You can't even sometimes control your school when you go there. So you will be conditioned. So how can you get over that? By remembering what I just told you in the session, that you always remind yourself of who you are at a core level. So you listen to all that, you accept it, right? You accept it. If you are, let's say you're Lebanese, and you're in France, and they look at you as Lebanese, you can't change that. You're Lebanese. Okay, so how can you change that? It's part of reality. The same way you look at a French person as a French, right? That's fact, part of reality. But you keep it at that level. You keep it at the role of interaction that's very necessary, right? And the dynamics that go with that. But you never ever go into your inside. Let's say tomorrow you're not a Lebanese anymore, or you're not French anymore. Does that make you a nobody? Right, Shermeen? Does not make you a nobody. Palestinian people lost their country. Does that make them a nobody? So other people were persecuted and went through genocide. Does that make them a nobody? People lost their money and job. Does that make them a nobody? So you will never let anything that's given to you from outside stick to you in terms of identity, because it can be taken away from you in a second. You remind yourself that you are a wonderful creation of the divine. You are a human being, even if you don't believe in any spiritual things. Just go to United Nations, the Charter or the Bill of Human Rights, and see the rights that has been given to you by the biggest authority in the world. That's the United Nations, right? The biggest constitution. And that gives you a right for the fact of being human, right? That alone is enough. So read that and understand your rights, right? And that alone will give you a sense of pride. And nobody should take that from you. No father, no boss, no husband, no country, no authority, no children, no friends, no brothers, no sisters. Nobody takes that from you. Now, to do that, you have to elevate your level of consciousness and start thinking of yourself at that level. That's why I said you need to go deeper than this. We need to really experience this so that you integrate it into your thinking and you start living by this. Otherwise, it becomes shallow, and with time and all the noise around you, forget about it, and then the world start tossing you around by judging you, giving you labels, saying you're that, you're failure, you're success, I like you, I hate you, and they put you in boxes, and they become biased about you and all the prejudices, and you name it. And you experience that every day. So you have to protect your soul from inside. You have to leave your soul intact. You keep it intact. You do not let anybody abuse your soul, anybody undermine your beauty as a human being. It's not an easy thing to do, because people sometimes are ruthless, right? But you protect yourself, shield. A shield. I have a brother, God bless him. When we were kids, he had, I'm sure you'll understand this. He had this sign. You know this sign? Some of you will laugh now. You know what this sign is about? So every time somebody said him something nasty, he would do this sign. I used to ask him, we were kids, what are you doing? He said, this sign, everything you're telling me comes from here and goes back to you. So nothing is happening to me. So it will be hard to him, and he's just doing that and smiling, because that's his childish mechanism of protecting yourself. But if you look deep inside, it's not really childish. He just found his way to keep his soul intact, and that's what you should do.
Thank you so much for replying to me. I personally believe that when someone knows himself, his weaknesses and his strength, nobody can destroy that, because he will be building a strong foundation. Plus, if we have a sense of purpose and meaning in our life, nothing can destroy us. I don't know if you agree with me on that.
I agree with you, but with just a small remark is that the journey of knowing yourself is a continuous, long and deep journey, and sometimes you need help because you think you know yourself, and you can spend your entire life and many lifetimes without even scratching the surface of who you are. So it's important that you take every opportunity to work on yourself, on your self-development, through reading, through attending seminars, therapy, whatever, all these kinds of educational things, so that you get to know yourself more, and whatever you said comes deeper and has more meaning and value.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much. On behalf of HR professionals, I would like to thank you for this wonderful session. HR professionals, please let's say it loudly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Take care of yourself, and
Thank you, and plus one.
You too.
And take care of your soul, your spirit from inside. That's what matters.
God bless you.